Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, and I'm sending each and every one of you loads and loads of love and happy Christmas to you, because it's Christmas today, and I hope you're ready with your turkey and your presents and everything. And wherever you are, whether you're on your own, you're not on your own, because I'm here with you wishing you a very happy Christmas. And I just want to send love to each and every one of you. You're all so very special to me. And you're so much a part of my life, and I just appreciate so many of you for all the wonderful things you do, and I just love you guys so much. And thank you for making this journey so worthwhile for me. I really appreciate all the comments and the kind words that so many of you have said, and it means a lot to me. And so nobody is alone today, because even if you're on your own, don't forget I'm with you, and lots of love goes your way. But before we get started, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. I thought it would be very appropriate today to have a Christmas story, and this one is going to warm the cockles of your heart. So what could be better to start Christmas Day or to end it with a good story? So let's get started. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Penelope, and I grew up in the West Virginian countryside with my mother and dad and my older brother Nicholas, whom we chose to call Nick for short. Growing up, we had an idyllic childhood because we were such an incredibly close and loving family, and my parents raised us without imposing any expectations upon us. That was often the case with many of my peers, whose parents piled on the pressure for them to attain great grades in school and to aspire to becoming something very big later on in life. My parents would tell us the complete opposite. They didn't care if we swept the streets for a living or whether we danced for the Sadler's Well Ballet. All that they appreciated was that we were happy in our lives, and that was all that mattered to them. This meant growing up we felt as though we could truly express our own individuality without having our wings clipped. From a very early age, my brother Nick began to express a huge interest in flying. He was fascinated with all things that had wings, whether physical or mechanical. So he had a fervent passion for birds and for aircraft of all kinds. He was certain that one day he wanted to fly a Super Cub over Alaska and become a bush pilot, because he believed that the small size of the craft invariably meant that he would become like a bird flying in the sky. While Nick wanted to soar to great heights and fly like a bird, I wanted to remain very much rooted and grounded on terra firma, but I did not have an inkling what I wanted to do with my life. So I naturally envied my brother for being so certain about his future life path. We were both incredibly blessed to live in such an exquisite part of the world, where every morning I'd wake up to the most exquisite panoramic views over the imposing mountainous valleys, rugged rocky outcrops, and dreamy forests that literally flanked the far side of our property and seemingly stretched back for miles. I believe that some of it may well have been public-owned land, but it was always accessible to our family without any established boundaries, which was very fortunate. To access our home, you would drive down long paved driveways that were lined either side with vast areas of undulating lush green manicured grass, along with ornamental hedges and a scattering of large and small trees on the grounds. On the right-hand side of the valley was a silvery lake that was surrounded by imposing statuesque trees that stretched back into a large forest that was well maintained with hiking trails and footpaths. Our house was nestled in the centre of the valley on a slight hilly incline. It looked like a large pearl surrounded by clusters of green emeralds. We lived in a timeless, very large, square Georgian home, built with a rigid, regimental symmetry that you would invariably expect to find in a typical Georgian home. The building was exceedingly well built on solid foundations, with brick, stone and stucco, and with symmetrical windows and turquoise-coloured shutters. Our house possessed a very grand palatial entrance hall, which was accessed through a large archway that was framed by a very stylised pediments and columns that led to a bright turquoise wooden front door with a gleaming golden knocker. On the rear-hand side of our home, close to the kitchen and entertainment area, we had a very large tiled-covered patio area, which overlooked the most glorious lily-covered pond, and often at night when we sat out in the early dusk drinking strawberry daiquiris, a firm favourite with my dad, we would observe all kinds of animals coming to the water to drink, like raccoons and white-tailed deer. We were also privy to observing some phenomenal bird life. When I was about 15 years old, my mother asked my brother and I to go to the apple orchard, which was a short walk away from the pond, to collect some apples because she wanted to make an apple pie for dessert. "I think it's such a pity to waste all those delicious apples," she said, "so just look for the best fruit you can find." So my brother and I scuttled towards the orchard. I was carrying our picking basket in my hands. Suddenly we stopped still in our tracks. "Look," whispered my brother. "Over there. Can you see it?" "What is it?" I whispered. "I've absolutely no idea," said my brother. That was when we saw the strangest sight that I've ever observed in my entire life. A large humanoid creature was sitting on the ground with its hairy back facing away from us, and with a very long arm was holding small pieces of bitten apple and feeding them to a little sprog that looked only a little larger than a tiny toddler. It was the cutest thing that I've ever witnessed, and even more adorable than a human toddler. She was cradling her precious, very expressive sprog in her powerful legs as she fed it pieces of apples, and once it had eaten its fill, she rocked it lovingly in her arms backwards and forwards and began to whistle to it in a way that sounded rather like a bird. It was a very pretty sound. My brother and I stood frozen to the spot like solid ice statues, so fearful that the creature would observe us and run away. Suddenly I carelessly dropped my basket on the ground, and the creature quickly turned around and stood up. Her golden brown eyes looked shocked to see my brother and I just standing there. For a moment all was very silent and still, as we just stared at each other, locked in what I can only describe as a silent stupor, as no one made a sound. The creature was obviously female, and was about 7 foot tall, 600 pounds and 3 foot wide, and she was covered with long flowing golden blonde hair, and I personally thought she was very beautiful. The creature was sinewy, muscular and powerful, and she had the most impressive shoulder muscles that I've ever observed before, and a distinctive bullet-shaped head. Her face was very human-like, with a brow ridge and deep-set, lively golden eyes. The gorgeous little jovial sprog was much more auburn and darker in colouring than its mother actually was, and its hair was also finer in texture. It pointed towards us with its tiny overlong arms and minute little hands, and it made a very strange chattering sound, almost as if he was asking its mother what we actually were. It seemed remarkably intelligent, on the ball, and very alert and sharp for something so young and tiny. Suddenly we heard my mother walking towards us, asking what on earth was keeping us so long. I could literally have killed her in that moment, because the creature looked utterly terrified and startled when it heard my mother's voice approaching us. It dashed swiftly through the orchard at a lightning speed, like a cheetah on the wind, with her sprog firmly cradled in her loving arms. We watched in wondrous awe as she glided away with such extraordinary, seamless, majestic grace. I can honestly say that I did not feel an ounce of fear in the presence of this awesome, mighty and incredulous beast, the likes of such that I've never encountered before. Sadly for me, the encounter was far too short-lived, but the gentle, stirring and loving energy the creature exuded will stay in my memory for a lifetime like a priceless treasure that will never ever be forgotten. "What on earth has got into the two of you?" snapped my mother. "Standing there, looking as if you've both seen a ghost? What on earth is going on with you both? I asked you to pick me some apples. It's not complicated, but you're just staring there blindly into space in a complete dawdle. I'm better off doing these things myself, honestly." As we helped my mother gather some apples for her pie, Nick whispered to me and said, "Sis, this is our secret. We're never to tell anybody about this. Understand? Pinky promise." We both clinked our pinky fingers together in an agreement. "Pinky promise," I agreed, and I was so thrilled to share such an amazing, awe-inspiring secret with my brother. When my brother and I were far away from the prying eyes of my mother or father, we would ask ourselves over and over again what this strange, marvellous and phenomenal creature we encountered actually was. We'd never seen or heard of such an anomalous creature ever existing in North America before. When my brother was older, he finally left home to settle in a remote part of Alaska, which is quite literally a 13 million acre park of awe-inspiring wilderness. My brother told me where he was living was so off the beaten track that it was about 100 miles to the nearest road, so invariably travelling by plane was his only viable option. My brother learnt to fly the Super Cub under the super instruction and guidance of a phenomenal bush pilot known as Rodney, who recognised at once that my brother had a natural flair for flying because he also possessed that raw gut instinct that was required in flying this extraordinary Jeep of the skies. My brother told us that flying his bright red Super Cub over vast areas of tundra, imposing snow-capped mountains, volcanoes, glaciers, coastline and waterways was like strapping on a pair of wings and becoming like a bird. He said he felt such joyful elation and such incredible freedom soaring in the skies like a majestic golden eagle. I gather he never ever landed on proper runways, but instead on mountain tops, river bottoms, sandbars and beaches. It didn't get better than that, he told us. My brother also told us that the Super Cub was actually built in the 50s by a man called Mr. Piper. I gather that no one has been able to trump the Super Cub, although there have been natural modifications to the craft being made over the years, like the addition of large tyres that have made the plane much more safe. Sometimes my brother referred to his Super Cub as being like a magic carpet because he could literally land in parts of the wilderness where no man has ever been before, which made my brother feel like a pioneer, explorer and adventurer. Naturally, while my brother was embarking on following his solo adventures across the Alaskan wilderness in his Super Cub, our family invariably missed his jovial, fun-loving presence around our home. But we were so excited that he was finally returning home for Christmas, and we could barely wait to see him again, because we had not been in his company for over 9 long months. "We must get the place very festive for your brother," my mother insisted, "and I'm going to make sure we have all his favourite treats on the dinner menu." I could see that my mother had an animated look on her face as she sang happily to herself all day. I knew she could barely wait to see Nick again. Our family was bustling around for Christmas, decorating our home with a very large Christmas tree that looked like a great work of art, with its red, gold and green baubles and red ribbons, along with the intricate wooden decorations which I believe came all the way from Germany, including a massive angel that graced the top of the tree. After all our exciting Christmas shopping, we had finally laden our Christmas tree with tons of spectacular-looking presents, all marvellously presented with extravagant ribbons and bows and exquisite paper wrappings that I couldn't wait to tear open. I had spent a lot of time under the tree trying to figure out what some of the strange, anomalous parcels addressed to me actually were. I couldn't wait for Nick to return home and to open my present that I'd purchased for him, which was the most tiny little ornament of a bright red cub plane, and I knew he was going to love it. Suddenly I heard my mother's phone ringing, and I watched her as she calmly answered the phone. At first she seemed serene, and then I noticed her face took on a pale greenish pallor, and her eyes grew round like saucers, and then she threw the phone down and began to scream, "No! No! No!" I picked up the receiver. "Who's there?" I asked. "What have you said to upset my mother like this?" "Sorry, I didn't mean it to come out like that," came the voice. "I'm Rodney. I taught Nick to fly the Super Cub. I don't know if he's told you about me." "Yes, I know who you are. What's going on?" I asked. "I regret to have to inform you, but your brother's had a very, very bad accident in a remote wilderness area of Alaska. He's missing, presumed dead." I could not listen to any more of this horrifying conversation, so I also dropped the phone on the floor, where it crashed to the ground with a mighty clang. I could hear the startled voice on the other end of the line saying, "Hello? Hello? Hello? Is anybody there?" My heart was pounding in my chest like a heavy drum, and I could feel the adrenaline surging through every fibre of my being. I wanted to scream, cry, or hit something as hard as I possibly could. I could feel my stomach muscles churning violently and curling and twisting and folding into knots, and I could feel the bitter taste of bile rising up at the back of my throat. I felt nauseous, sick and overwhelmed by an immobilizing grief that paralyzed my emotions into a stunned stupor. My mother was sobbing her heart out. and I was walking around the place like a zombie. And when my dad heard the horrifying news, I heard him punching the boxing bag in the gym so hard that it almost came off its hinges. I could see by his vacant stare that the revelation of Nick's death had hit him very hard indeed. None of us were taking this grievous news of Nick's death well, as you can imagine. It transpired after the crash that the Alaskan authorities believed that Nick's body had been evacuated from his plane by a grizzly bear and subsequently devoured, which meant we didn't even have a body to bury. I cannot put to words to describe the level of grief that hit our entire family, and I do not believe I'm exaggerating when I say it hit us so hard, like a major volcanic explosion, and literally shook our entire world apart. The next morning it was Christmas Day, and snow had fallen overnight, turning the grounds on our property into an enchanting and magical winter wonderland. It looked like the quintessential, most perfect Christmas, and the panoramic snow-covered views were utterly exquisite. I remember thinking that this Christmas was an irony of ironies, rather like a rose with very sharp, piercing thorns, so exquisitely beautiful, and yet hauntingly painful all at the very same time. My mother was trying to be very upbeat and positive. Nick would have wanted us to have had a good Christmas, she insisted, as she bustled around busily in the kitchen, preparing the turkey and all the trimmings, and I knew she was keeping herself preoccupied to numb and suppress the agonizing pain. We sat down at the table and my dad began to carve the turkey. None of us said a word. Despite the delicious smells and aroma of the Christmas food, from the cinnamon to cloves and crisp turkey, I truly couldn't envisage myself eating a single thing. My appetite had just vanished and disappeared, and I was certain I would never feel hunger again. Suddenly we heard a familiar warm voice. "Why, such a morgue! On Christmas Day! I know that I, for one, would love some of that delicious-looking turkey, Mum." Nick was standing there at the table, looking at us with a broad beam on his face. For a while we thought we were seeing a ghost. "Nick, is that really you?" gasped my mother, dashing into his arms. "Oh, my poor baby," she said. "I thought you were dead." Suddenly our home became light and airy, filled with joyful laughter and happy chattering voices. "This is the best Christmas ever," I said, my eyes welling up with tears. "My brother was lost and he's found, was dead and he's alive." Later that day I gave my brother the present I'd brought him, and I expected he loved my little model, the Super Cub. "It's beautiful, Sis," he said, marvelling at the little plane. "It's just like the real thing." He looked at me with a jubilant smile and said, "Remember our pinky secret?" he asked me. "Of course I do," I said. Well, when I crashed my plane, it was in an area that was filled with lots and lots of trees, and one of those hairy creatures came out of those trees and pulled me out of my Super Cub, because I was really, truly stuck in there. It literally bent back the record of the plane. That was how strong it was. And even though I was suffering from a mild concussion, I could see this creature very clearly, and it quite literally saved my life, because if I'd remained trapped in there, I would have been a sitting duck for a grizzly bear or some other predator. The hairy humanoid took me to a cave in a mountainous valley and watched over me the entire time until I finally came around from my concussion, and that was when I was able to finally call for help. "Did it look like the creature that we saw in our orchard?" I asked. "Almost identical, only I believe it was male, and it didn't have that auburnish hair, but it was more brown in colour. But I was so concussed, I was able to observe very few details." "Wow," I said, "that creature actually saved you? I can hardly believe it. You promise you're not making this up?" "Since when have I ever lied to you, Sis?" "Since never," I said. "Exactly. So now do you believe me?" "Well, of course I do. I'm just amazed, that's all. Because that creature we saw in the orchard, it was so quiet and shy. I can't believe it had the courage to just help you like that." "I can't answer that question. I wish I knew." "So this is our pinky secret number 2, said my brother, taking my pinky finger into his. And then we saluted. "Well, it's a Christmas miracle," I said, beaming. "That it is, Sis," said Nick, giving me a hug. "That it is." All these years later, we do not know what caused my brother's supercat to suddenly lose its power in the sky, because he was a phenomenal, incredible pilot. But I do know this for a fact, that this was very definitely the best Christmas of my life, and I'm eternally grateful to the Alaskan creature that I now know to be a Bigfoot for saving my brother's life. So there you are. That's my story. I just want to thank you for that incredible story. Just what we need on a Christmas morning or a Christmas evening, wherever you are. And I just want to wish everybody an extraordinary happy Christmas. Go out there and have a phenomenal day with lots and lots of love to each and every one of you, because you are all so precious. Until next time, goodbye and good night.